Okay, here we go. So, how many heard me a couple of years ago? All right. So, I'm going to go through some of the same information, but we're going to have a lot of new information as well. So, I do this because of my sister, Marcia. She was 4 years younger than me. She had cerebral palsy. And back then, it was a long time ago, no, no one knew a lot. My parents, she was diagnosed at the age of 2. I was 6. And my parents sat me down and said, Marcia has cerebral palsy. We don't know what that means. But for us, it means we're going to help her through her lifetime. And when you get older, you're going to be in charge of her for the rest of your life. And I thought that was the coolest thing on the planet because I was 6 and I loved being the boss of my brothers and sisters. But as time went on, I learned that it meant something different. When she was 10, I was at the store with her. She could walk a little bit at that time. She was developmentally delayed as well as physically. And so because she could walk a little bit when she was young, and we'd be walking through the store and she'd be holding onto the grocery cart and people would be staring at her. I finally turned around to somebody and said, "What are you staring at?" And they were embarrassed, so they hustled off. She was verbal and she turned around and looked at me and said, "You tell him, Mayor." So I learned on that day that I was going to be her protector. I didn't want that. I talk as a sibling at this point. I didn't want to be her protector. I wanted to be her sibling. But as time went on, she was on her 21st birthday. I had a party for her. Everybody was gathering around. I invited my friends over to my apartment, which was in a 3rd-story flat. Got her upstairs. She was living in a wheelchair by that point. Got her upstairs. She was drinking wine with the rest of us all evening. And so getting her down to the first floor, back to my parents' house, was tough. And my mother didn't talk to me for months. But ever after that, she always told everyone, "This is my sister. We got drunk together when I was 21." I'm like, my mother said, "Aren't you embarrassed?" I said, "No," because she wanted normal. That was her goal. So I kept learning. She kept teaching me. And then as she got older, she was 34, still living at home with my parents. And I asked my dad what the plans for her was, and he said, "Well, she's going to live here." Oh, no, she wants that. There were 6 of us, and 5 of us had moved out. So I asked her, "What do you want?" And she said, "Well, I got to stay here with mom and dad, but because what would they do without me?" I always tell parents, be careful, because sometimes we express that in our own ways, right? So we got her a placement in a residential program that was great. She excelled. She did stuff she never thought we could do. And then on March 4th, 1995, it was a Saturday, I was sitting in my office and my phone rang. It was my dad. My sister had had a seizure that night. She couldn't turn over and she suffocated in her sleep. Took me a while to get over that in my life, but that's how Protected Tomorrows really got started at a bigger way. I started a financial planning firm back in 1989. After 20 years in the corporate world doing mergers and acquisitions, I decided I wanted to get out of the corporate world and do something with my life. So someone said to me, could feeling sorry for yourself and sitting back and looking at what happened in your world make a difference? And so that's how Protected Tomorrows really got kicked off. We work with families all over the country, helping them plan. I learned that my parents had not done planning. They had had a will, and their will said, if something happens to us, leave Marcia's share to her, and it's her responsibility to use that in Marcia's best interest. Because they knew that if she had assets, that's the one thing they did understand, is that they couldn't have assets and she could get help, right? And that's not unusual advice sometimes we get from attorneys, because one thing I know also is in the world of special needs, I'm trying to get this to go forward. Oh, has to go over here. Okay. So our mission in Protected Tomorrows is the same as your mission. We know that we want our families to be safe and happy, and we want our child who might have some special needs to also be safe and happy, right? I'm also a mom, and I became a daughter. Both of my parents became disabled, so I became their caregiver. And since then, I married someone who had 3 young boys who had been abused by their bio mom. And so I stepped in as their stepmom and have been there ever since. Their dad walked away, so I raised them, and they're all doing great except for one. Um, and he is in a major struggle right now, but I'm sure that we continue to support him. He'll do well. All right. The other exciting thing about Protected Tomorrows is as of last week, we merged with a major corporation that provides services to professionals around the country, both financial, CPAs, attorneys. And so we'll become a resource. We're going to build teams around the country of Protected Tomorrows. We're going to build apps for the schools so that families who have a special needs child can learn, building a database of all the housing programs, all the special recreation programs, and we're going to build a company that would be able to provide services, quality control services. So if a child is living residentially, we will have a company that will go out and do quality checks. So it's just the beginning of what we're going to do. The CEO of this major company approached me 2 years ago. He had said, if I'd known you existed, my life would be easier. Where were you? We found out that his whole management team, 85% of them have a family member with a disability. It's a partnership company. There's other companies like me who provide different types of services. 80% of those partners had family members with disabilities. So it was a perfect match for us. We get to take ourselves and go international and help families around the world and provide resources. So I'm pretty excited about that. And a lot of the things that we have created will be the impetus to make that happen bigger. So one of the things I do know is that this information that we provide is not readily always available because the financial planning industry, there's 2 programs in that program to become a CFP that talks about special needs planning. And we want families to know, don't goof this up, because if you goof it up, some of the funding that you want to get won't be there. But I also know that when something happens to me, I want to make sure my sons are good. I want to make sure they have the resources they need. I want to make sure somebody's there for them. I want to make sure that all that's in place. And I'm a single mom. How am I going to make that happen? So that's kind of the purpose. But we also know that we have a lot to do. Does anybody think we don't? You're here, right? You have to understand the medical things. You have to understand the financial things, the legal things. And then you have to make sure that if something happens to you, everything you know in your head is passed on. It's a lot. And so somebody like me comes along and says, okay, you need to do your legal work different. You need to do your financial planning different. You need to do all the other planning you do in your life differently. You have to plan your vacations differently, everything. Where do you start? So we created a process. It's 8 steps. Not everybody starts at number 2. Some people start at number 6 because it's critical in their stage of life. A lot of the things I'm going to be talking about today, if you go back and say, what did she say? It's on our website. We have a website that helps people think about the planning that they need to do. There's a planning system on that site. There's also a place where you can sign up. My mission wasn't only to help people who have assets and have money. Our mission was to help anybody on this planet who has a special needs family member. And so we run free classes once a month. We now have about 300,000 people signed up for those classes. I put a list of the classes on the table for you. Some of them are about financial planning, but some of them are about how do you take a vacation? And what are the resources that can help you take a vacation? Or what are the services for transportation out there? Especially if we were talking earlier, I was talking to someone whose daughter has the capacity to now get a job. How are they going to get there? What supports are there on that side? What are the recreation programs that are out there nationally? What are the government-funded programs that are out there nationally? So it's a lot of information. Some of them are legal. Some of them are siblings talking about what their impact was. And we have siblings who become guardians in the future. And last year, we had a sibling who was 50 years old who was talking about his job. We had a couple siblings who it was their job, just coming on. The parents had just passed away. And we had a sibling on who said, my parents haven't talked to me about this at all. It was a pretty lively conversation. All right. So my goal today is to give you enough information. I'm going to give you a lot so that you know how to take your first step. And I gave you all a little green card. It's like a little postcard. I call these guilt cards. What I'd like you to do is when I'm done today, write down the thing you heard today that you're going to start with. On one side, put your name and address, if you would. On the other side, put the thing that you want to be reminded about, because you're going to go home. You're finishing this conference. Does anybody go home and they're going to go jump right into what you learned today? Probably not. So we give you these cards. So if you fill them out and say, I heard Marianne say that I should do X or I should do Y, whatever yours is, write it down. And we'll send this back to you in 90 days. Okay. So that it'll give you a kickstart to do what you said you're going to do. People write all kinds of things. Somebody said, take the box off from under the bed and sort out the papers, right? It doesn't matter what yours is. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want you to take out the piece of paper that you have, and it has 2 green boxes on it. Big sheet of paper, 2 green boxes. And there's 2 boxes on there. The first box says, what's the best thing that could happen for my child's future? And the second box is, what's my biggest fear? As a parent or a caregiver, whatever role you are in, sibling, what's your biggest fear? So just take 2 minutes, please, and write yours in. It could be a bunch of words. It can be a whole sentence. It could be whatever you want it to be. Now, I know that sometimes the first question is a little harder. What's the best thing that can happen for your child's future besides a cure? Okay. And then the second thing is, what's your biggest fear? That you could probably could write the whole back page of many pieces of paper. Best thing that can happen and your biggest fear. And you're a couple, do it differently. Dads think different than moms. Thirty more seconds. Okay. Best thing that can happen. What did you write? Shout it out. And you have to shout it so everybody can. She has a community. Next, how about this table? What'd you write? Independence. Okay. Okay. A stable, residential, safe place when parents are gone. How many of you hear the phrase, I just want to know what's going to happen? I want everything to be okay when I'm gone. What's going to happen when I'm gone? Right. What else? So stable, um, home, residential program. Right. Employment, meaningful employment or productive or something. It doesn't even have to be a paid job, right? Something. What else? I couldn't hear that. Lots of fun money. Okay. Anybody else have anything else? So it's a place to live. It's fun and money to pay for the fun. It's stable, a job. How many have other children? What do you want for them? Same thing, right? So I have 3 boys. One doing pretty well. He's gotten through some of his stuff. The middle boy has mental illness, OCD, and he's blind. He's blind because he shot himself, but he's doing pretty good. And the other boy is now living in a hospital setting to try to get through some significant issues. I want the same thing for all 3 of them, the ones that are successful and the ones that are struggling really hard. I want the same thing. Now, I know that I want to make it happen. And sometimes people say to me, well, How do I start? It's hard to start thinking about that. I did a program in a city where we were trying to create a housing residential program. There were 60 families involved. And we went through this whole process of what do we want? What do we want it to look like? What do we want the housing look like? What do we want their jobs to look like? What do we want their fund to look like? What do we want? How do we communicate to who's going to be in charge? And so we went through this whole process for 10 weeks, once a week. And then I brought investors in because it costs money. And we brought investors in and I said, families, tell the investors what you want. And they said, we want our family members to be safe and happy. And they said, wow, we don't know how to measure that, because how do investors think, right? And so they said, we don't know how to measure success. That's the hard part, is what we're going to talk about today. How do you get there? Because I will tell you, it is not that easy. It's hard work. It's really hard work. And so if you're willing to do the hard work, I have families, we've been doing this now for 37 years. And we have families who we worked with 37 years ago coming to us going, wow, that was hard work. But we feel our child's in the best place they possibly could be. And those are families with coming from all different walks of life. It is work. Okay, so how do you start? Well, the most important people in your child's life is you. So when you get on an airplane, and the oxygen mask comes down and you're sitting with your child, whose mask do you put on first? Your own, right? It's the same thing here. If you don't, so families say to me sometimes, okay, we're going to create a special needs trust and everything we have is going to go into that trust when we pass away. What's 100% of nothing? Right? So what's important here? You got to do your own financial planning. There's 2 sets of financial planning we're going to do. One for you and one for your child. And they're different. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure you have a net worth statement. All it is a list of what you have and what you owe. It should include every asset you own, all your retirement accounts, all your checking and savings accounts, any asset you have that is maybe stock from your companies that you work for. It should include the value of your home. It should include the values of any life insurance. It should include every single thing you own. Now, I can tell you this is a really important step, because if nobody knows where everything is at. I've had 3 clients pass away this year, parents of a child. And 2 of them we didn't know before. We were brought in when the parents passed away. The other one was a parent who had lost a child the year before. And so they were very diligent about making sure that the other children understood what the parents had. And when the dad asked me to meet with all the kids and talk about what he had so that everything was clear to the family, we did that. We had a family meeting, and everything we knew about that family was done on paper. We had charted it out. We had showed how it was going to pass to the spouse and to the other children. And 3 weeks after that meeting, dad was diagnosed with cancer, and a week later was gone. Okay, so now mom and all the other children, including the child with special needs, was left, and we had to help prepare. Well, we thought we were told everything that they had on that piece of paper. Everybody agreed. And then when we started doing the estate tax planning and all the things helped the attorneys, there was a car worth $100,000 in a garage somewhere, and there was units of vacation places in Hawaii, that they had purchased, and they would go once every 5 years. All these little things that have value, and that estate documentation of getting the money to the spouse and then to the children is already in process for 1 year, and it's going to take another year before we finish all the legal documents and all the tax documents we needed to do. So when I talk about making sure you know what you have and what you owe, be diligent. Okay. The second step is to know what you spend. Nobody likes to do this. Anybody? It's not a budget. It's what comes in and what goes out. Nobody likes to do this. I always say, pick a weekend. I always have clues on how to do things, right? Pick a weekend. Let's see what's coming up. 4th of July. Pick the 5th and the 6th of July. and say, today we are going to do this task. What is it? Well, you go and look at your tax returns first. You say, okay, I know what's coming in. Let's get the details on that. I look at all my paycheck stubs. I look at my pension statements. I pull up my I pull up all my data. And then I pull my bills out, all my utility bills. There's lots of bills we know. We know what our housing bills are. And you think in today's dollars, don't worry about thinking about tomorrow's dollars. Think in today's dollars, because we don't know what things are going to cost 30 years from today. Sometimes I look at stuff and I'm like, oh, it used to cost a quarter and now it's $1.25, right? So your utilities, transportation, and if anybody wants some of these things we're talking about today, you have my card. You can email me and say, could you send me some worksheets for this? We're happy to do that. And some of them will be on the website shortly too. The hard ones, you know, what is your insurance cost? All the house insurance and car insurance and life insurance and disability insurance. What does that cost? The hard ones are once we get down here. So we talk about a lot of things. We get into entertainment. How much do we spend going out? How much do we spend on vacations? Do this monthly. If you got an annual number, divide it by 12. What are all those bills cost? What is our lifestyle? This is the hardest part. What is it? What do we spend on food? What do we spend on clothes? What do we spend on charities? That you could probably find on your tax return. What do we spend for our pets? What do we spend on subscriptions? How many have online subscriptions you don't even know you had? They're just coming in your bill. But he's like, yeah, me too. There's a way to find those all out and get rid of them if you don't use that stuff. Gifts, that's a big one. People forget how much they give in gifts. So it's a hard project, but if you really sit down, you do it once, and then it's forever easy. It's a project. Why is this important? Well, there's a line item also that on your cash flow that's on nobody else's. It's how much do you spend uniquely for your child with special needs? What is that expenditure? As one number, and I'll tell you how to get the one number. But you want to put that in your cash flow. Why? Because this cash flow drives your future. If you don't know what you're spending, how do you retire? People come to me, a man came to me with $6 million. He said, could you manage my money for me? I said, sure. I don't know what to do with it though, because you can't tell me what you spend. Oh, yeah. I need $20,000 a month. Sounds like a lot to us, right? I just need $20,000 a month coming off that portfolio. Well, that was easy to do. But he didn't tell me he was really spending $50,000 a month. Really. So does he have $6 million anymore? No. It's impossible to manage a pot of money if you don't know what you're supposed to do with it. So unless somebody will do this work, I won't ever take them as an asset management client, ever, because they don't know. So you have to know what you spend in order to predict what you need. This is, of all the stuff I'm going to tell you, this is the most important thing you're going to do for your child. Because if you don't know what you have, how can you know what you're going to have to leave? So you do this job. The other things you need to do, I'm going to tell you all the things you need to gather if you're going to do this. You need to know your Social Security statements. So go to socialsecurity.gov. They don't send you anything anymore. It's all online. They don't send it to you automatically. So you go online, get your Social Security statement. You open an account for yourself. It's pretty secure. I've not seen anybody ever get hacked on the Social Security statement system. So you put in your information, it'll tell you all the history. So one thing you can look and say, did every year I worked, did my payments get in there? And there's important stuff on here. It tells you what you're going to get at all your different ages. That's important to know. So if you're going to retire at 62 versus 65 versus 70, what you're going to get. There's all these other numbers on your Social Security statement. One of them is, how much would your spouse get? How much would you get on your spouse's record? You know, if you understand how that works. It tells you how much your child can get, your child with a disability can get when you retire. How much can they get when you die? Important numbers. And then how much can your whole family get? So in this particular situation, this family could get $6,000 a month, and the most the child could get is $2,600 a month on your record. Okay, that's called DAC, Disabled Adult Child Benefit. I'm going to show you how it works. Is that an important number? Did you know that your Social Security will pay your child when you retire? When you retire, your child will get one half of your age 67 benefit. And when you pass away, they will get 75% of it. But we have to understand how that works. So everybody who's ever gone online and checked the Social Security there's software you can get that says, how should we take our Social Security? Husband and wife, how will you get the most out of your two Social Security checks? You can't use that software. Because if you use that software, it'll tell you how to get the most, and it leaves your child out. You need something that says, okay, when should husband take his or hers? When should spouse take it? And how do you both get the most, including your child? So I'm going to show you a couple of things on how to do that. All right. This is important data to have in your planning process. Did you also know how many will get a pension on their job? Okay. Did you know that some pensions, we know that many times they pay something to our spouse, but it also sometimes when our spouse also passes away, your child can get a benefit if they have a disability. Teachers' pensions, police pensions, federal government pensions, state government pensions, state university pensions pay a benefit to your child. But you got to read the fine print. A, if your child gets your benefit, they can lose their government benefits. So you have to check your pension and says, yes, it'll pay a child. Well, does it allow us to pay that to a special needs trust? Because if it doesn't, you have to go back to the pension and you have to educate them and you have to get the pension changed. Don't say, oh, that's what they do. You have to go back to the pension board and say, this is why we need you to not pay the pension to my child, but to their trust. Okay, because if your child gets the pension, their Medicaid is gone, and Medicaid is what pays many of the programs that our children are going to need into the future, right? The other thing is read that pension language carefully, because many times this is the child gets it as long as a child is dependent on your tax return when you pass away. Well, the likelihood of that is slim, because if your child gets funding and they live into a residential program of some type, they're no longer a pet dependent. So if you count on that pension in your number calculations, but then your child is living residentially, you inaccurately counted that as an asset for your child, okay? And the other thing to know is how many have your children on your health insurance at work? How long can they stay on? How long can a child stay on a parent's health insurance? Age 26, unless they have a disability. Then they can stay on the parent's health insurance as long as the parent has it. Okay, important thing to know. You have to prove something that says they have it, and usually it's with a doctor's record. The health insurance companies are not allowed to force you to have your child as a dependent on your tax return. They only can force you to provide medical information to prove your child has a disability. Okay, some of them say, well, show that they're dependent on your tax return. That's against the law. So what you have to do as parents differently than anybody else is you take your Social Security differently. And I'm going to show you an example of why in a minute. Okay, and then do you understand about your health insurance? Okay, all right. When there are programs out there also that when your child becomes a certain age, and maybe even some cases, this is by state, funded by Medicaid, so you have to have Medicaid to get this, that you can become the child's personal support worker, and you can get funding for your child to be the caregiver or for hiring caregivers, and that money is tax-free. It is federally and state tax-free. Okay, so the number of people's tax returns I look at, and they're getting $26,000 a month for a caregiver, be a caregiver as a parent, and then they're reporting it, their CPA is reporting it on their tax return and saying, yes, that's income. That's wrong. So we have to refile all those tax returns because you don't owe income tax on personal support money. Okay. Now, other things, some of the CPAs know, okay, that's personal support money. I know that the tax code says that's not taxable. If you use a tax program, many times it'll say, do you get waiver money? If it says yes, it knows not to tax it. What the CPAs don't know is personal support money paid by Medicaid waiver is not taxable, but it is earned income. What's the difference? Taxable income versus earned income is two different answers. So it's not taxes. Don't pay tax on it. But can you count it as income in order to make a Roth contribution? Yes, you can. CPAs, people come to me all the time and write my CPA said I cannot make a Roth contribution because I'm the spouse and I'm getting paid the personal support worker money. So I got $24,000 a month of income, it's tax free, but it's tax free, so I can't make a Roth contribution. It is considered earned income, and yes, you can make a Roth contribution. Pardon me? Federal tax. Some states do. Most states don't, but some states do. You're right. But from a perspective of federal tax and being able to Roth contributions, yes, you can. Okay. Right. So we took care of you. You got all your data together. You can put it into a software program. You can hire somebody to help you with your financial planning, whatever makes sense. But we take care of you, except we need some more data yet. We didn't finish because we need your child's data. So what do we have to do for your child? First thing you do is people always ask, well, how much money do you think I should set aside for my child? Or how much money do I need to leave in my will to fund the special needs trust with? I used to say, it's a big amount. I don't know. It's a lot. Now I know, just like I can calculate how much it costs for college. If a child's 2 and they're going to go to Harvard and you tell me 8 years, I can calculate that. I can also say, based on your child's disability and what do you see for the future and where are you at today, how much, at any point in time, how much should be in that special needs trust with what we know today. All the planning you do, I will tell you, any financial plan you do for you and your child is good at the moment you do it because our lives change. Okay. So this is not a one-time deal that you do for yourself. You do your financial plan, and then every year you look at it and say, where am I? What changed? Every year you look at this. But once it's like you want to build a house, you want to build your retirement home. And so what I know today about when I want my retirement home to look like, this is what it looks like. Now next year, it's going to look really different. It's going to be in a different place, needs more bedrooms because I got more grandchildren, whatever. And then 5 years later, it looks different. So it's just like building that. The plans you lay change as you go. So let's talk about what we have to think about for our child. We have to do a cash flow for them just like you did for yourself. We have to understand what's coming in from SSI. We're going to talk about that. What's going to come in from Medicaid, and where are we going to spend the money? And you do that detailed plan just like you did for yourself. What do they need for fund money? What do they need for basic care support? What do they need for medical bills? All of the things that you are doing for yourself, you're doing for them. You're doing it the same way. But when we do a cash flow for your child, we say what's coming in from SSI, Medicaid, family, maybe their work, what's coming in, what are the expenses that they're going to have, and probably what's coming in and what's going out. There's probably a shortfall. Who's paying for the shortfall? Who's paying for the shortfall? You are. That shortfall has to go back into your retirement, into your plan. So you aren't retiring if you're just a couple. Let's say you have no other children, you just have the 3 of you. You are not retiring for 2. You are retiring for 3. So after you get your child's plan done and you calculate monthly, what do you need? That number goes back into your cash flow. So you don't finish your plan till you get this one done, because then you feed that into yours. And you're going to fund your retirement. You're going to fund all your working years, including your child. You're going to fund all of your retirement years, including your child. And then you're going to include another retirement beyond you. So how do we create this vision? It's really looking at when you're doing it, saying, where do I see my child living? And do I make sure that they get Medicaid so that that residential program that we want, that we talked about, is funded? How do we make sure that the medical needs are met? What's going to be covered? How do we make sure that their recreation is covered? How do we make sure their fun is covered? All of those things. And if we think they're going to work, what is it going to cost us to make sure that they can work? Because we want them employment. But if there's a problem with transportation, we have to fund that. Right? Okay. So let's talk about how benefits work. Again, the most important thing is understanding your numbers. So you get your Social Security statement. So let's start from there. This is how many have your child already getting some kind of Social Security benefit? Okay. A lot of hands didn't go up. So let's do a quick walkthrough of how these benefits work. There's income rules for these programs, and there's income and asset rules for those programs. So we're going to start up here. Social Security disability. That's you and I are working, and we're paying FICA into our paycheck. Anybody who works pays into the Social Security system called FICA. And so we are buying Social Security disability insurance. Now there's rules, okay? I would be considered disabled if I cannot make what's called substantial gainful activity, which is currently $1,550 a month. So if I couldn't work, something happened to me and I can't do my job, I have to prove because of my disability that I cannot make $1,550 a month. Somebody came to me and he had a job and he couldn't do the job anymore, but he could answer the phone somewhere. He will not be disabled. It's not your own job, it's a job. If you have disability of your own, private, that kind of disability insurance is you can't do your job. But Social Security looks at a job, right? So this is a program for those who work. So this is Medicare goes with it, really important. When I get up here, I get Medicare as well. But these programs are for people who didn't work. They have a disability that didn't work. So SSI is a program that says, okay, this is for someone who hasn't worked yet. They have it and may never work or may work somewhat. Same rule, same income rule. We have to prove they cannot make $1,550 a month. But because these are needs-based programs, we have to make sure that in their name, when they apply, they do not have more in their name than a house, a car that they drive, a prepaid funeral, $2,000, and an ABLE account. Okay, those are the assets someone can have and get that benefit. Along with SSI comes this Medicaid program, and that has limitations of a house, a car, a prepaid funeral, $2,000 plus some, because for Medicaid, it's now $17,500 they can have in their name, and an ABLE account. However, if you have 17,000 in your name and say, oh, I can have more now, but if you want SSI, you cannot. It's 2,000. So let's walk through a really simple example. Okay. So if someone's getting SSDI, we talked about what they could have. So I would apply for my benefit and I would get Medicare. Let's talk about what applies for your child if you haven't applied yet. We have to prove they have a disability. If they are under 18 and you have any of those assets, your child will not get it until they're 18. And they will not get it until the month after their 18th birthday. Because unless their birthday is the first of the month, let's say their birthday's April 23rd, they will become eligible on June 1. Because anytime in April that they're under 18, they don't become eligible. And you don't want them looking at your assets. Okay? Because if you have an income, any kind of income or assets, your child does not qualify. Your child's eligible at 18. How much is that SSI amount? Go back. $943 a month. Your child will become eligible for $943 the month after they turn 18. How do you do that? You tell Social Security this is the disability, and they have no money. Okay. Sounds easy. How many have had an application for SSI that took 9 months or 10 months or 12 months? Okay. Sounds easy. You have to provide medical records. I'm guessing in your cases, you have plenty of medical records to show that your child has a disability. Then you have to prove the child has no assets. Be careful. Make sure they don't have savings bonds in the drawer. Make sure they don't own a life insurance policy that has cash value. Make sure they don't have a little savings account that you set up for them or a big account that you set up for them. Okay, that's what you want to make sure, that they don't have any assets. Once you prove that, they become eligible for SSI, except for one little quirk. Once you apply, Social Security will ask you about those assets. They will also ask you, where does your child live? If you say my child's 18 and they live in my home, you will not get $943 a month. Because living in your home for free is called an in-kind asset. So when they ask you where your child lives, you have two choices. You can say, well, they pay their fair share of the living expenses. Don't do that. People will tell you to do that. It's work. Every time you have to do it, every time they ask you new information, you have to say, okay, this is our mortgage, this is our real estate tax, this is our insurance. If there's 3 in the household, if your child's fair share would be more than $943, they're not going to get any money. Just tell them your child is paying you rent. It's really simple. Your child's paying fair share rent in my house, $300, $400 a month. Your child signs a rental agreement with you, and they're going to pay you rent. Now you're a landlord. Legally, you should file a Schedule E. You should say, I got this. I got $400 a month rent for my child. Here's the expenses against it. They paid their fair share of also, because I'm a landlord, so I can deduct partial of my real estate tax. It's not going to be taxable income if you do it right. Now, your CPA may say, oh, don't worry about it. Your child's paying you rent. Don't worry about it. Do it right. You never want somebody, you're going and not, you're getting rent and you're telling Social Security you're taking rent and you're telling the IRS you're not. Don't do that. Okay. So your child's getting $943 a month if you do it right. What else might stop them from getting $943 a month? Any kind of income stream that they have, including if they have a job. Let's say they're allowed to make $85 a month. If they make more than that, they will take a little bit away for what they make until they're making too much. The most they can make is that $1,550 when they'll lose it. So your child's getting their SSI. Some people say, well, I'm not going to jump through all those hoops for $943. It's a really important benefit. Okay. Now, something goes with that $943, Medicaid. This is the bigger benefit. $943 a month is nothing until you say Medicaid. Well, Medicaid will help me get the personal support worker money of 3 times SSI. That's how much personal support worker money at the federal level is 3 times your SSI check. Coming to you as the personal support worker. Medicaid also pays residential programs. Medicaid is the ticket. I call it a ticket. You might want your child to get into our program and they're going to say, okay, we need the Medicaid approval. So don't not get the Medicaid. Now, if your child gets Medicaid and they're on your health insurance program, a lot of people say, well, my child's got medical benefits at work. I don't need it. Yes, you do. Because your health insurance might pay first. Medicaid can be a second payer. It pays drugs. Not all drugs, but a lot of drugs. And so if your health insurance pays something, you might have a deductible, but so might Medicaid. And if Medicaid's deductible is lower, you will pay the lower deductible. Okay, important program. It also pays other programs. It pays lots of programs. And if your child might be able to work and they're coming into the transition program, Medicaid will pay a job coach for them to go to a job and go with them to work. Okay. All right. So important programs. Now I'm going to show you what happens to your child's benefits as you get older. As a real simple example. Because when you're doing the financial plan for you and for your child, now you have a different income stream. Okay. This is all kind of complicated stuff, but just understanding the concept is important. All right. I'm going to give you a real simple example. This is Dad's Social Security statement. It says at age 67, he is going to get $2,400 a month. Okay. And it also says that a child on Dad's record, child meaning a minor child or an adult disabled child, could get $1,800 a month max. And it also says the most they're ever going to pay on dad's record is $4,100 a month. Okay. So dad can get $2,400. The child can get $1,800 of dad's, and the max they'll pay is $4,100. So I'm going to show you a real simple example so you get the concept. Here's the benefit programs. The child gets $943 a month. You apply for the child's benefit. Okay, you got the full amount. As soon as the child turned 18. Dad retires. How much is dad going to get? He's 67. At $2,400 a month. Remember we said dad's was $2,400. Mom never worked. How much can mom get on dad's record? Everybody know? You can get your own or half of your spouse's, whichever is greater. So if mom's is 0, how much can mom get? Of the half of the 2,400. So mom's getting 12. So they're paying $2,400 to dad and $1,200 to mom. How much is left of the max? $500, because the max was $4,100. So when a parent retires, they get their amount, and Social Security will say to you on the application or on the online application, do you have an adult disabled child? And you will say yes. Great. File for another application for your child. They're already getting their SSI. They will come along and say, okay, your child's eligible for $500 from dad's record. So now the child gets $500 from the dad's record, and their SSI goes down. Because SSI is there to bring you up to 943, not give you more than that. So if your child's getting $500 from DAC, and they're only getting $443 now from SSI, are they better off? Yeah, this is why. When they get into this world, they get Medicare. Same program seniors get. So now they're still on Medicaid as long as you stay qualified. But now when they get into DAC, 2 years after their DAC, Medicare starts. This is where it gets really complicated when you retire. Dad wants to retire. So let's say dad wanted to retire at 67. The day he retires, what goes away? If his health insurance was provided the benefit for your child, when he retires at 67, what goes away? Health insurance. So now your child's only on Medicaid. Anybody want that? Okay. So if dad's going to retire at 67 and his health insurance goes away, we got to do something about that. Because if we wait till this process and dad retires and the child gets DAC and 2 years later they get Medicare, we got a 2-year gap of only Medicaid for your child. So you got to do some careful thinking. Should dad work longer? Should dad take Social Security before he retires and pay the penalty? Or does mom have any kind of record? Remember we had mom getting half of dad's? Maybe mom needs to work a little bit so that she has a Social Security record. I don't care if it's $50. Because if mom has a record 2 years before dad retires, I'm going to say, Mom, go get your Social Security 2 years before dad retires. And if mom takes her Social Security and gets $50, the child might get $25. I don't care, because the child can get this program on any parent. So if mom takes it early and she gets $25, 2 years later, the child goes on Medicare. Now dad retires. Now the child gets dad's Social Security. But I had that 2-year gap. Somebody has to take their Social Security before the parent providing the health insurance retires. That's why you can't use those Social Security systems. All right. Now what happens? Parents pass away. Both parents pass away. When dad passes away, how much does mom get? Mom gets dad's. Spouses get each other's, whoever's higher when one passes away. So in this particular situation, when both parents passed away, the DAC goes up. SSI goes away, the DAC goes to that maximum amount. Why do you need to know this? When you're doing your cash flow for your child, they were getting $943, now they're getting $1,800. You need to know this. Okay? I know it's really complicated. I just want you to hear it and say, boy, this is something I probably ought to find out. Go get your records. Do the scenario. Okay? All right. So what do you need to remember? Know your group health insurance and how it's going to cover your child. Know your own Social Security benefits, and everything I told you changes all the time. All right. Okay. So how are you going to do that? If you can't leave money for your child, what do you do? Okay. So you can't leave money directly to your child. You can't leave it to somebody else hoping they'll do it. So my parents had left money to me for my sister. What's wrong with that? It's mine. Can I go to Hawaii? Yep. If I get sued, is this money that's set aside for my sister at risk? Yep. If I pass away and goes to my heirs, yep, problem. If I was married and put it in my joint records with my spouse, thinking my spouse will take care of it, then he files for divorce, half of it's up in arms for the divorce. Okay. So we don't do that. We create a special needs trust. How many here have a special needs trust? Pretty big number. That's good. Okay. So a special needs trust is just a legal document that says, I'm putting money in there. It works because it's not your child's money for the benefit of your child. Your trust should not have the language in it that this money is payable to or for. It should not say to or for. It should only say for. We see that language a lot. And Social Security loves to find those little, oh, you can pay the money to your child. Okay, your child can't control it. It's spent for their supplemental care. So it's paying for what the government is not paying for. So somebody asked me earlier, well, what if my child is doing really well and has money in that trust? It's for things that the government is not paying for. So the government is not paying anything anymore because they lost their benefits. Well, then it's got a limitation, that's all. Okay, your child can never control the money. And then in this particular trust, it's called a third-party trust. See, only people who put money in this trust is not your child. Anybody else can put it in. Grandma, grandpa, you only need one trust. Grandma can fund it. Grandpa can fund it. Aunts and uncles can fund it, and you can fund it, right? So, but when the child passes away, it goes to whoever you say. So you set the trust up. This is for my child when I'm no longer here. And it goes to whoever I say. So I have a trust for my son. It's for his supplemental care. I have selected a trust company to manage it. I don't want anybody else to have to do it if I'm not here. So I manage it until I pass away. A trust company will manage it. And when my son passes away, the money goes to heirs and charities. I encourage people to not leave it all just to heirs, but to consider the charities that helped you. Okay. All right. So it has all the rules. 5% of the attorneys on this planet know this. Be careful. People come to me say, I can't afford it. I've just negotiated with NALA, which is a National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, to I will help them understand this market if they will give me pro bono services. So they have agreed if I go in and do a presentation with them to their families, and we put 50 families in a room, if the family qualifies because they're low income, they have agreed that they will do 2 wills, a special needs trust, and powers of attorney for $500. That's a low price. So we're going to have attorneys around the country who will do this for low income families as well. Okay. I'm still working on them because I'm saying there's got to be some who have to get it free too. We'll see. All right. So the special needs trust, what do you have to know? You have to know the monies for the supplemental care of your child. You have to know you're putting who's in charge, typically you. And when you pass away, you're going to name the other people. Now, I have years been doing this with families who say, I'm going to put the other kids in charge. I want to put my brothers and sisters in charge. Then when they get older, they go, wow, what was I thinking? They don't want to do it. My siblings are gone. They're as old as me. My kids, other kids don't want to do it. I'm giving them a huge job. If you think being a trustee is easy, it's work. Now, if you have siblings who are in the financial business and can do it and are really business people, maybe they can do it. But who after them? So I'm also going out and looking to all the trust companies and saying, okay, not every trust company will do this. Only some trust companies will do this because it's extra work. The trust company has to manage the asset, but they also have to pay the bills, and they have to find services. And if services aren't quality, they have to figure out how to change those services. It's a big job. And so that's what family members have to do. So now I got all these clients who are now 85 and 90 years old going, okay, I got to change my documents. Just think it through carefully, who those people or institutions should be. Okay. So you name who you're setting it up. You're the grantor. You are setting up the beneficiary, who's your child. You're setting up who's going to get it when your child passes away, and you're saying who's going to be in charge. That's all you got to know when you go see the attorney. Have thought that through before you sit down with the A, make sure it's an attorney who's qualified to do it. And B, make sure you have your decisions made before you walk in the door. Because if you don't, it'll take forever to get done because you will not be able to figure it out. Thought it through first. Okay. All right. Have it not be inside your will. You do not want a testamentary special needs trust, one that gets created at your death. Because if you create it as one that gets created at your death inside your will, it will not exist until you die. And what if grandma says, I'm leaving a bunch of money for your child? Well, grandma's probably going to die first. Is there a special needs trust if it gets created in your will? If your will says create the special needs trust and grandma dies and leaves it to the special needs trust, there is no special needs trust. Make sure the special needs trust is a standalone document. When you walk out of the attorney's office, you have a book. And if they give it to, if your special needs trust is 2 paragraphs, it's wrong. Attorneys charge by the letter. I'm just teasing. I tease them. Okay. It needs a lot of legal verbiage. So the Social Security won't count it as an asset. It's really important that they do it right. Special needs trust should have language in it that says this special needs trust can fund the ABLE account, which we'll talk about. An ABLE account is owned by your child. It's one of the rare things a special needs trust can pay directly for your child. It's got to have proper language in it, though. Okay. And so, too, we want to make other people to be able to piggyback on it. I want my siblings to be able to do it. I want it to be grandfathered to the rules of today because I don't know what special needs trust will be valid in 20 years. All right. And how do you get money in the trust? You make sure your wills. So you're not done. You are not done when the attorney gives you the documents. That's when the work begins. You make decisions, you go to the attorney signs the docs. Now your work begins because the attorneys don't always do this. And if your financial planner doesn't know this, you become responsible for it yourself. You need to make sure that your wills in your trust, that's how one place, your wills in your trust leave money to the special needs trust. 2, you can have life insurance. Check your life insurance, okay? Because when you signed up for your job, you checked the box to leave the money to my spouse, and if my spouse isn't alive, please leave it to my children. That's a mistake. Because if you leave it to your children, your child will get it, and they will lose their benefits. Every beneficiary on all of your life insurance policies, including your group at work, needs to be changed. Your retirement accounts need to be changed. If it's going to your child, it should say special needs trust. Now, I don't know if I have this in here. The Secure Act. Anybody heard the Secure Act? The Secure Act is some legislation that passed that says we get to wait to take our retirement money. We used to have to take it when we were 70 and a half, then it was 72. Now you must take retirement money out of your retirement accounts either at 73 or 75. It's age 73 if you were born before 1960, 1960 or later, you have an age of 75. You must take retirement money out, unless it's a Roth. When they did that, they said, oh, we're going to get our tax later. We're going to be okay with that as long as your kids who get the money later pay it faster. So when you pass away, your retirement money used to go to your children and it could be stretched out over their lifetime. No more stretch for typical children. Now, the retirement money must be taxed within 10 years of your death to your children, except an exception. The exception is a special needs trust. That's a really good exception. So when we did planning years ago, we would say, let's leave life insurance to the special needs trust and let's leave the retirement money to the other kids because they can stretch it. And retirement money is kind of messy. Now we're changing. So this is why I'm saying this is not static planning. This is planning you have to watch. We are going back to all of our clients and saying, maybe we should change the beneficiary of your IRAs to the special needs trust and leave the other kids life insurance. That's a much more tax efficient money. And I can quantify it and say, everybody ends up with more money that way. Because if I leave my retirement accounts to my special needs trust, those trusts I'm leaving for my sons, that money can be stretched out. The tax can be stretched out over their lifetime instead of paid tax in 10 years. So now the government did us a favor on IRAs. Okay, so important to know and look at who are the beneficiaries of your IRAs and who is it going to. And if it's you wanted to get to your child, make sure it goes to the special needs trust. All right. Just avoid giving inheritances to your child. If grandma leaves money to your child directly, you can't undo that. Once your child gets it, they get it. So if your child's you're getting PSW money, personal support worker money, and you're getting other funding, and all of a sudden your child has money, everything stops until they spend it or we fix it. They can have 17,500. We can put it in the ABLE account. If you have an ABLE account, there's a place where we can put money, but it's got a limitation of how much we can put in. So if your child inherits $500,000, we got a problem. Okay. So there's another kind of special needs trust called a payback trust. It's called an OBRA trust. I call it an oops trust. Oops, somebody made a mistake. We have to go to court. We have this other kind of special needs trust called a payback trust created. We take that money that got to your child and put it into this trust, but we have to get court approval. It's an expensive process. And then when your child passes away, the difference is when your child passes away, there's a government reimbursement. Okay, so just remember the first party, just called a first party trust, an OBRA trust. If your child gets money and it's a lot, if it's more than $18,000, we need to consider this to get your child their benefits back. All right. Other hard decisions you have to make. Who's going to make care decisions for your child? We named the trustees. We didn't name the people who are going to step into our shoes. This is the hardest question. Who is going to do what you do? How do you name them? You name them in your will. If you become the guardian, guardianship meaning you've gone to court and take over the responsibility for your child once they're 18, because once you're 18, you're still a parent, but you're not the legal guardian. So if you go to court and become your child's guardian, you have to put this in your documents of who are you nominating to be the next people. Another step you have to do. So far we've had to name money people. Now we have to name care people. Who are they going to be? People who are older and their other kids are older too. Now we're going out and finding corporate guardians to say who's going to take that job. Sometimes there's nobody that would do it or could do it because they're going to have all these jobs. So when your child turns 18, you have a decision. Do they have capacity to make their own decisions? 2, does your support system in your state have supported decision making? That's not guardianship. It's where your child is signing some documents, giving different jobs to people. You're going to be in charge of my money, and you're going to be in charge of where I live, and you're going to be in charge of my fund. They can sign contracts with people if they have capacity, and not all states have it yet. They could sign a power of attorney only if they have understanding of what they're signing. Otherwise, it's not a legal document. Everybody in this room should have a power of attorney. I think everybody in here is over 18, right? If you don't have a power of attorney and you become sick and you cannot make your own healthcare decisions and money decisions, your spouse has to go to court to get those rights. So make sure you have powers of attorney. And if you don't go to an attorney, go to your state website. State websites have approved documents. Go there, pull one down. If you don't know how to find it, email me. We'll send your state for you. You get it, you sign it, you say who's got my decision-making capacity if I get become a disabled, and you get it notarized and maybe witnessed and notarized, okay? But your attorney should do these for you. Can your child have one of these if they have the understanding and capacity to understand that they gave you rights? Otherwise, you're going to court, you're telling a judge my child needs a guardian, and these are the steps they'll take. They'll go to, you have to prove to the court that your child has a disability with a doctor's letter. All right. How should you divide the money? I've got 2 more topics, then we're going to wrap up. How do you divide the money? There's no right way. But if you think about how much your child needs versus your other children, sometimes it can't be equal. I call it the head versus heart decision. We calculated what your child needs, and wow, the amount your child needs is more than you're going to have. Now, you can do a perfect financial plan, and you can have enough money for your lifetime, and you're going to divide the pot. And then all of a sudden, you get Alzheimer's, and you don't have life insurance, and you don't have long-term care insurance, you don't have those things in place, and now your money is being up for your care. How are you going to divide the money if there's only a little bit left? Now, little known fact, if you need nursing home care yourself, you can take all of your child's money, put it into their special needs trust, and go and Medicaid yourself. Not many people want to do that, but it's a last resort. Okay, we talked about the Secure Act. So you're going to need special needs trusts. You need an ABLE account. How many know what an ABLE account is? And we're going to run out of some time, but I'm going to tell you it's like a 529, only it's for special needs, and it's tax-free savings for your child. They're created by state. Most states have one. Some states, Florida only, be a Florida resident. Some states you can be in any. Some states don't have one. Most states that don't have one are starting to create them. And some states like Illinois, anybody can use it. But if it's your state, they probably have a tax deduction to use your own state. So be careful. If, like in Illinois, I could put money, when I had to pay my son's medical bills, and it's something that's not covered by his health insurance or Medicaid, I can put the money from my son into his ABLE, get a tax deduction, and take it out right away and use it for his care. So ABLE, whenever you put money into it, there's a tax deduction, state tax deduction, not federal. You got to know the states. You got to know it. We're having a webinar June 25th at noon. It's free. It's being run. We're sponsoring it with the Able Today people. The Able Today people are the people who manage the national rules of ABLE. And we're going to talk about not only what the rules are today, but the legislation that we got on the table now to make changes to make it better. What's good about the ABLE? A, it's tax-free. B, it's like a college savings plan. You have to use it for proper things, right? So if you don't, you put money in and you don't use it for disability-related expenses, when it comes out, could be taxable with a penalty. So you save into this account. Your child must have a disability. It's up age 20, up to at 26. Now the disability is going to, in 26, it's going to age 46. You can use it as long as your child had this disability diagnosed by that date. One ABLE account per person, that's it. You can't set one up and grandma can't set one up. Your child can only have one. You got to coordinate within a family. That's one of the things we're hoping to change. 2, the amount you can put in is a federal gifting amount per year. So the max you can put into an ABLE is $18,000 a year. Today, your child works, they can put another $14,000 in of their own work income. But otherwise it's 18. So if I put 10 in, the most anybody else can put in is 8. It's tax-free. It's good. The downside of an ABLE is that the government can get reimbursement for Medicaid spent when your child passes away. That's it's called a clawback. We're hoping to get that removed, but that's got passed that way years ago. That's why people don't put it. You can fund, in Illinois, we get up to $500,000 in an ABLE. Takes a long time at $18,000 a year. It's invested. There's in these ABLEs, there's a checking account, there's a savings account, there's debit cards. Your child owns it. It's one of the things it can own. Now you're saying, well, my child doesn't have capacity to manage it. If they own it, but you can become an authorized user on it. How do you set these up? You go to your ABLE, whichever ABLE you're going to use, it's online. Just go online to your state. You can open up an ABLE account, and it's all, you know, they're not going, you don't go to a bank to open one up. Each ABLE is different, though. So if you have created a 529 for your child, you're allowed to move 529s to an ABLE. The 529 you own, so it's not going to be a problem for benefits, but at some point they're not going to go to college. You can move 529 money to the ABLE. The Able to Work Act is because the child's working, they can put their money in. And these are things that are not permanent in the legislation. And in 2026, they will go away unless they're made permanent. That's on the table this year for legislation. The things that we're trying to get rid of is that recovery from Medicaid, increasing how much we can put in, the contribution limits, and having more than one account. The other thing we're looking at is if your child begins to work and the company puts money in their 401k because they treat them like every other employee, your child can lose their benefits. So we're trying to get the ABLE to be a legitimate retirement plan so that the employers could fund it and not have it count against your child. Okay. The last thing I just want to cover real quick, and then we're going to wrap up. You do everything right. You get the trust set up, you do your retirement plan, you do your child's retirement plan, you got everything set up perfect. You're perfect. And then you pass away. Who knows what to do? You are giving big jobs to someone else. And you know what? People say, well, by that time, my child will be, I don't know if any of us know when our deadline is. And we don't know what our deadline is. Then we have to plan that it could be at any point. Now, leaving one person or two people all of the things that you do is, how do you do that? I mean, there's so many nuances about my kid's life, and one of them, he's at risk all the time because of some additional mental illness he has. He's at risk of killing himself at any point in time, and he'll call me once a month, and I have to talk him off the ledge. Who is going to do that when I'm not here? Right? Who is going to, when my other son is having a medical breakdown, going to stop what they're doing, leave this conference, get on a plane fast enough to get him to where he needs to be? Who is going to do that? Right? So you have to build, I say, giving one person a job, if you're going to be somebody to be the guardian for you, do not give them a job. You're giving them a company. I think about it like that. I'm giving somebody this job. I'm giving the whole company to them, and I better create all the other roles. I better find a CFO, and I better find a recreation director, and I better find all the other people are going to do this. So if you look at it and say, here's your child in the middle, I'm going to build a dream team for my child. I'm going to name a coach, and I'm going to name a trustee and a guardian. But then I'm going to give them everything they need so that their job is livable. If you give jobs to your other children and they're having children, how do they do it? You give it to your siblings and they're retiring, how do they do it? So you have to be able to give them help. And there's many areas. A key one is, who are the doctors? It's not just who those people are. What do they need to know? Right? And this is not just when you pass away. This is when you're unavailable, which is why you do it now. How do you create the team of people? If your child's in a faith-based support group, there's lots of them out there that provide all kinds of services for your child, and your child loves to go there. Do the people you're leaving in line after you know that? If your child's living in a home, we have many families who have now created homes, and we've hired agencies to manage that care, but the parents own the home, and so we have to provide for support of the house. The parents are going in and cutting the grass and doing all this stuff. Well, somebody's got to replace that. All the professionals who are working with you need to work with them. The attorneys who work with you need to work with them. If they're still in school, somebody has to know that an IEP is not a parent-teacher meeting. Right? It's not different, right? Service providers, all the service providers need to be dominant. You have to document all of this. We have a system where you can put that all in. It's all of the information. You have to know what do you want? Where's your child living, or where do you want them to live? What kind of school are they in? If they're working, what works and what doesn't work? What do we have to watch out for? Medical care, not just the doctors you're seeing, but the doctors you should never, ever go to again, right? You don't want those second people to go there and say, I heard this was great. No, it's not. Social life. You want your child, we said we want our child to have this life. We have to make it happen. We don't get to just say it's going to wish it, right? It's all of these things we have to worry about. And then the little routines. We work so hard to make our child's life better and to make them safe. All those little things that we put in place, right? And the people around them. My son is fairly OCD. And so when he went into, when he lived with me, my water bill was very low until he moved in. And my water bill used to be $65 a quarter. When he moved in, the first quarter he moved in, my water bill was over $3,000 because he took a shower all the time. It's huge, right? I found a little thing you put on the shower. It shuts the water off after 10 minutes. It worked, right? But if he comes to live with you, or you're the next one in charge. When he moved into his residential program, first thing I did was put that on his shower. It's a little thing, but it's those little things that make the other people's lives better as well as his. What are all the things that you have built around your child that work that nobody else knows? So if you do all this other stuff, you do all your financial stuff and your legal stuff, and you just think you're perfect, this is the piece that makes it work. And it's just work. And it's not a one-time shot. It's always. You're somewhere and go, oh, I better add that to my list. We have ways to do it. We have a system where you can load it. We are expanding that with this new company where we are going to be able to have it on an app. You'll be able to load all this stuff. You'll be able to share it with other family members so they can get on and learn from you, and it'll be a learning tool. That will be one of the main pieces we're going to focus on. That you can load everything. You can have other people on it. You can invite them to participate so that you can store the details. It's not just where the legal documents are, it's the details. Okay. And you got to tell people about it. Do you think that other family members are wondering if they're going to get a job? They are. Like, I wonder if I'm going to get that job. Well, make it easy on them and talk to them about it. Maybe they'll say, sometimes people say, well, I'm surprised you're not giving me more to do. I'd be willing to do more. Okay. How many learned something? Okay. Take out your little guilt card, please. And on one side, write your name and address. And on the other side, write the first thing you are going to do when you go home. Based on what you heard today, is it get powers of attorney for yourself? Is it to go online? We have lots of attorneys listed on our website to find an attorney near you. If you can't find someone, email me. You got our info email address. There's a place on our website on the top of the screen that says contact us. If you need something, go to the contact us. It'll send you to a screen. Put in there what you saw me here and what you need. And if it's something that you're looking for, if we can help you, we will send it to you. It's kind of a new process that we just set up where we can get to you quickly. But use that contact us. But here, write down what you are committing to do. And you're committing to do it in 30 days. Now, we're not going to mail you this back till 90 days. So we know that if we give you 30, it might take you 90. But you'll get it back, I guarantee you. So whatever it is, make it something real. Don't make it something that you know you won't do. Make it something real. Because I know if you do step 1, you'll do step 2 and 3. Okay. All right, I'll leave you with one quick little story while you're finishing that. And then we'll collect those cards and we will get them back to you. So when my sister passed away, my mom was really sad. And so I asked her to write about my sister. And I'm using all that to do what I do. But when she got Alzheimer's and couldn't communicate to me anymore, I didn't think she'd written it all down, and she did. She'd written me pages and pages, 1,100 pages of stories about my sister. And so when I started to read them a little bit at a time, it was a pretty emotional process for me. And I got to one of the days she wrote about, and it said, remember the day that you wanted to go outside and play, and I didn't let you play? I'm sorry. I made you an adult when you were a kid. You were little. And you just wanted to play. But I had committed, when my sister got diagnosed, there was a program where she had to crawl an hour a day. It was supposed to develop her brain. It was a program out of Pennsylvania. I said, I'll do it. So my mother was it was a kind of a strict household. And I had to crawl an hour a day with Marcia around the house. Little house. We had to crawl around the rooms a lot to make it happen. And my mom had gotten a special knee pads and all that. So I crawled every day. One day, I didn't want to crawl because my friends were going to a play and I wanted to go with. And my mother said, nope. You said you're going to do it. You're going to do it. I cried. But I learned discipline. but I was really upset for a while. So my mother's letter to me was, I'm really sorry. We should never have made you be an adult as a kid. And as I look back on it, that was a mistake we made. So it was a pretty emotional read until the next day I read her next page. And her next page said, you know, you know what I wrote yesterday? I'm not really sorry. That was my mother. And she went on to say, because I will tell you why I'm writing you that. Is because the next day after you were so upset, you asked me to take you to the store and buy you these little pink pieces of paper. And on those pages, you created this club, and you wrote that you were creating a crawling club, and you delivered it to all the neighbors. And in 1 week, you had enough people to crawl every day, and you only had to crawl 1 day every 2 months. So I made you an entrepreneur, and so I'm not sorry. So I thank my mother for letting me be here tonight, this afternoon. Thank you very much.